Take them, Amina. It is over. Here are the divorce papers. These are the divorce papers, Amina. It is over between us.
The day Kelechi came back to the village, nobody ran to greet him. Nobody clapped. Nobody shouted his name with joy. Because the man who stepped out of that black SUV was not the same man Amina had nearly died to build. In one hand, he held a leather briefcase. In the other, he held divorce papers. And standing beside him, dressed in gold and smiling like she had already won, was another woman carrying his child. The same village that had once praised Amina for starving herself to send her husband abroad now stood in complete silence, watching the woman who sold charcoal, washed people's clothes, and buried her pride for 5 long years, realize that the man she saved had returned to bury her instead. But what Kelechi did not know that morning was this. Before the sun went down, the woman he thought was weak would begin a fight that would drag his secrets into the open, shake the whole court, and make him wish he had never come back at all. 5 years earlier, Amina did not look like the kind of woman people wrote stories about. She was not loud. She was not flashy. She did not speak English with a foreign accent or wear expensive fabric. She woke up before dawn, tied her wrapper tight around her waist, balanced a basin on her head, and walked to the roadside market while the sky was still dark. Her hands always smelled of smoke because she sold roasted maize and charcoal. In the rainy season, she added cassava and groundnuts. In the dry season, she carried water for women too tired to fetch it themselves. Life had taught her to survive in pieces. But when she met Kelechi, she believed survival could become something softer. Back then, Kelechi was a struggling young man with sharp dreams and empty pockets. He was clever, polished when he wanted to be, and full of promises that sounded bigger than the village itself. He spoke about traveling abroad, studying, becoming successful, building a house for his mother, and changing the family name forever. Most people laughed at him. Amina did not. She listened. And because she listened, he fell in love with the way she believed in him before the world did. They married with little more than hope and borrowed chairs. The food was not enough for everyone. The music stopped twice because of the generator, and Amina wore a gown sewn by a neighbor who begged for half the payment in advance. But that day, Kelechi held her hands and told her something that stayed in her heart for years. He said, "When I rise, you rise with me." What he did not say was that some men only love the ladder until they reach the roof. The first year of marriage was hard, but it was still sweet. They rented one room with a zinc roof that leaked when rain fell too heavily. They ate from one plate some nights because there was not enough food for pride. Amina would laugh and say, "Hunger tastes better when 2 people are loyal." Kelechi would kiss her forehead and promise her a future so beautiful it almost sounded visible. Then one evening, he came home with news that changed everything. He had been accepted into a business and law conversion program in the United Kingdom. It was not a full scholarship. Part of the fees, travel costs, and documents had to be paid by him. For a long moment, they sat in silence, because both of them knew that opportunity had arrived wearing a price they could not afford. Kelechi was the first to speak. He said, maybe it was impossible. Maybe the dream had come too early. Maybe God had opened the door for someone richer. But Amina looked at the paper in his hand, then at the man she loved, and made a decision that would cost her almost everything. She told him he was going. He laughed at first because he thought she was comforting him. Then she started calculating aloud. The little savings hidden in her wrapper, the jewelry from her mother, the small farmland her late father left her, the goat she was raising, the daily market business, the women she could cook for at weddings, the nights she could spend grinding pepper for restaurants. Piece by piece, she broke down her life and turned it into figures. Kelechi stared at her like he was watching a miracle in human form. What started as sacrifice slowly became war. Amina sold her gold earrings first, then the goat, then half of her father's land, even though the old women in the village warned her never to exchange inheritance for a man's ambition. She ignored them. When the money was still not enough, she borrowed from a cooperative group at a brutal interest rate. When that money disappeared into visa fees and school deposits, she began carrying charcoal sacks herself instead of paying boys to do it. Her shoulders darkened. Her palms hardened. She stopped buying meat. She told neighbors she had lost appetite, but the truth was simpler. She was feeding the future and starving the present. The night before Kelechi traveled, Amina sat beside their bed and stitched the tear in his shirt by hand, because she wanted him to arrive looking like dignity. He looked at her with wet eyes and promised her that the suffering would end soon. He said once he settled, he would send money. Once he graduated, he would bring her over. Once he became somebody, the whole world would know her name. Amina believed every word, because betrayal always sounds impossible before it happens. At first, Kelechi did everything right. He called every day. He said the weather was cold, the people were distant, and food there had no soul. He missed her voice. He missed her cooking. He missed the way she prayed over him before sleep. He sent pictures in front of tall buildings and libraries, and Amina showed everyone in the village with proud eyes. She would say, "That is my husband. Look at him. Our suffering is ending." But after 6 months, the calls became shorter. After 1 year, they became irregular. After 2 years, they became excuses. Sometimes he was too busy. Sometimes his phone had issues. Sometimes he was in class. Sometimes he was working extra shifts. Sometimes he said she worried too much and did not understand the pressure he was under. Amina swallowed every disappointment because women like her are trained to call patience by sweeter names. She defended him even when his absence started sounding deliberate. Then the money requests began. He needed funds for exam registration, then professional certification, then accommodation problems, then a business opportunity that would make their lives easier later. Amina wanted to ask how a man who worked part-time and studied full-time never seemed able to stand on his own feet. But each time she questioned him, he turned the conversation into guilt. "Are you tired of helping me now? Do you want me to come back a failure? Do you know what people are achieving here? Do you want all your sacrifice to be wasted?" So she kept paying. She borrowed more. She sold the remaining part of her father's land through a hurried family arrangement she barely understood. She even signed papers she never fully read because the man sent by Kelechi said they were urgent and connected to international processing. By the 4th year, people in the village began whispering. Some said Kelechi had changed. Some said he was living with another woman abroad. Some said educated men rarely returned to poor wives once they tasted city life. Amina shut all of it out. She told herself that gossip always hunts women who dare to believe in their marriages. Even when Kelechi stopped saying, "I love you" at the end of calls, she still held on to memory like it was evidence. Then one morning, he called with strange warmth in his voice. He said he was finally returning home. He sounded successful, confident, almost too smooth. Amina cried so hard she could not speak. She washed the house twice. She borrowed new curtains. She cooked jollof rice, pepper soup, fried fish, and pounded yam. She even used the last money in her box to buy a new head tie because she wanted the first image he saw to be the wife who waited with honor. But the man who returned was already gone long before the car door opened. The black SUV rolled into the village like an insult. Children ran behind it. Neighbors abandoned their chores. Amina stood at the doorway with shaking hands and a smile ready to bloom. Then she saw the woman seated beside him. Slim, elegant, polished, with sunglasses and a hand resting gently over a pregnant stomach. Kelechi came out first and adjusted his expensive watch before looking at the wife who had held his life together with bleeding fingers. There was no warmth in his face, no gratitude, no shame. He introduced the woman beside him as Nessa, not colleague, not client, not friend, just Nessa, with the confidence of someone who had already been given authority. Amina's smile collapsed before anyone spoke. She asked Kelechi what was happening, and instead of answering with compassion, he pulled out the envelope. He said he did not want drama. He said life had changed. He said they were no longer compatible. He said he had outgrown the village, the marriage, and the burden of pretending. Then he placed the divorce papers in her hand like he was serving food to a stranger. Amina looked down and saw her own name written inside legal language she could barely understand. He had accused her of violent behavior, emotional instability, and inappropriate closeness with another man in the village. He was not just leaving her, he was rewriting her into a disgrace. The market women were the first to react. One shouted that the devil had worn a suit, another spat on the ground. Kelechi ignored them. Nessa stood beside him with the cold patience of someone expecting a scene. Then Kelechi said the cruelest thing of all. He said the house Amina lived in would also have to be vacated because it was now part of his asset arrangement. That was the moment Amina nearly fell. The same man she sent abroad was not only throwing her away, he wanted the roof over her head. That night, the village did not sleep. Some people advised Amina to beg. Others said she should accept fate and leave before bigger shame arrived. A few men privately admitted that Kelechi was now too connected and too educated to fight. But pain does something dangerous when it finally becomes too heavy to carry politely. Around midnight, after crying until no tears remained, Amina opened the old metal box beneath her bed. Inside it were years of her own silent history. Cooperative receipts, remittance stubs, land sale papers, handwritten market debt books, voice notes saved on a cracked phone, passport application copies, a faded letter from the school abroad thanking Kelechi for payment of his first tuition installment, and one signed document she had never truly examined, bearing her own name beside a property authorization. The next morning she took everything to an aging local lawyer named Barrister Ize, a man people often mocked because his office ceiling fan worked only when kicked twice. He read quietly for over an hour. Then he looked up and asked Amina the first hopeful question she had heard in days. "Did you know your late father's remaining property was transferred into your name before his death?" Amina said yes, but only the village house and small compound. Barrister Ize tapped the papers again. Then you should know something else. The city property your husband is claiming may have been purchased partly with funds traceable to your inheritance, and this signature here may have been used under misrepresentation. For the first time since Kelechi's return, the ground beneath Amina stopped moving. The court case exploded faster than anyone expected. Kelechi assumed Amina would hide in shame and sign whatever was placed before her. Instead, she appeared in court wearing a plain blue dress, no gold, no performance, just quiet fire in her eyes. Kelechi arrived with a sleek lawyer, polished English, and the confidence of a man who had practiced winning around weaker people. He repeated the accusations. He said the marriage had broken down beyond repair. He said Amina was unsophisticated, confrontational, and morally questionable. He hinted she had grown close to a transport man who often helped her carry goods from market. He painted himself as a victim who had tried to elevate a woman unwilling to grow with him. People in the courtroom murmured. Amina sat still. Then Barrister Ize stood. He did not begin with emotion. He began with paper. He presented the cooperative loan records showing Amina had taken multiple loans matching Kelechi's tuition deadlines. He presented the land sale agreement, proving that the inheritance Amina sold had funded Kelechi's travel. He presented the school acknowledgement letter, which clearly thanked Kelechi for payment processed from an account linked to Amina's cooperative deposit arrangement. He presented voice notes where Kelechi begged for more money, called Amina his backbone, and promised that everything he built belonged first to her. Each piece landed like thunder. Kelechi's lawyer tried to recover by calling the documents old, irrelevant, and emotional. But Barrister Ize was not done. Next came the transport man Kelechi had insulted in court. His name was Musa. He testified that he was married with 4 children and had only assisted Amina because she paid him small amounts from her market sales when her back pain became severe. He brought dated market loading records. 2 elderly women from the market testified that Amina often skipped meals to meet Kelechi's transfer demands. One of them even described the day Amina fainted from exhaustion after selling goods under the sun, and still insisted on sending money to her husband before buying medicine for herself. The courtroom mood changed. Then came the worst moment for Kelechi. Barrister Eze produced the property authorization paper Amina had signed years earlier without understanding it fully. A forensic review suggested the document had been expanded beyond the purpose explained to her. What she thought related to travel processing had been used to support acquisition and control structures surrounding a property Kelechi now claimed as solely his own. Kelechi's face stiffened. His lawyer requested time. The judge refused. And then Nessa made her mistake. Believing Amina was already finished, Nessa had remained relaxed through most of the hearing. But during cross-examination, it was revealed that she had moved into the city property months before Kelechi officially filed for divorce. Worse, she had posted celebration photos online from that property while Amina was still legally married and still being asked for money by Kelechi under false pretenses. One screenshot showed a caption thanking "my man" for "our first home." The date on the post cut through Kelechi's entire performance like a blade. He was not a wounded husband seeking peace. He was a calculating man building a new life with old lies. By the second hearing, the entire village was talking about little else. Men who once defended Kelechi began avoiding eye contact. Women who had suffered in silence for years started showing up to court as if Amina's case somehow represented a battle larger than her own marriage. Even Kelechi's mother, who had once pressured Amina to be more patient, began to understand what her son had become. Still, the final blow had not yet landed. It came from Kelechi's own voice. Barrister Eze had recovered an old audio recording from Amina's damaged phone and restored enough of it to be used in court. In that recording, made during Kelechi's second year abroad, he thanked Amina for selling father's land and said, "Without your sacrifice, even that city house plan I started here would not exist. Everything is because you carried me." The courtroom went still. There was no legal gymnastics strong enough to make those words disappear. When the judge finally delivered judgment, nobody breathed easily. She stated that the petitioner, Kelechi, had failed to prove the moral allegations against his wife. She noted clear evidence that Amina had materially financed his education, supported his transition abroad, and contributed significantly to the assets he later attempted to monopolize. She criticized the abuse of informational imbalance in documents signed by an unsophisticated spouse under trust. She granted the dissolution only on terms that protected Amina's rights, awarded her possession and control of the disputed home interest connected to her proven contributions, ordered financial compensation, and formally struck out the defamatory claims made against her character. Kelechi did not look rich in that moment. He looked small. Outside the courtroom, Nessa removed the ring he had bought her and dropped it into his palm. She had been arrogant, yes, but even arrogance struggles to survive total humiliation. When she walked away, Kelechi called after her, but she did not turn back. For the first time since stepping into that black SUV, he looked like a man hearing the true sound of his own choices. Amina did not celebrate loudly. That was what unsettled everyone most. She did not dance. She did not insult him. She did not raise her voice. She simply stood taller than before, as if truth had returned a part of her spine that pain had borrowed. Reporters from a small local blog asked how she felt. She said, "I did not come here to destroy a man. I came here so my silence would not be used to bury me." That sentence traveled farther than the case itself. Back in the village, things changed slowly but permanently. The women in the market stopped speaking of sacrifice like it was always holy. Mothers started telling daughters to understand every paper they signed. Men who loved control became uncomfortable around conversations they once dismissed. Barrister Eze's office became so busy people joked that his ceiling fan finally got promoted. And Amina, the woman people once pitied, rebuilt her life with a steadiness no one could steal from her again. She reopened her business, but this time on her own terms. With the compensation money and court-backed asset protection, she expanded from a roadside stand to a proper food and produce store. She employed 2 widows and a teenage girl whose schooling she quietly funded. She no longer apologized for strength. She no longer mistook endurance for destiny. And on the wall of her small office, framed above her desk, was the first cooperative receipt she had ever used to send Kelechi money. Not because she missed him, but because she never wanted to forget the price of blind trust. As for Kelechi, success did not disappear from his life overnight. Men like him often survive longer than people expect. But respect is different from appearance, and once truth tears a mask in public, even expensive suits cannot stitch it back the same way. Clients became cautious. Old friends became distant. The village stopped calling him a symbol of achievement and started calling him what he feared most: an ungrateful man who rose on a woman's hunger and still tried to call himself self-made. Years later, people would still tell the story of the day Amina stood in court and turned suffering into evidence. Not because she was perfect, not because life became painless, but because when betrayal arrived dressed as success, she refused to die inside it. She chose to fight. She chose to understand the system used against her. She chose to speak before lies became legacy. And in doing that, she taught an entire community something many never learn in time. Love without wisdom can build a prison, but truth, once armed, can tear the door from its hinges. So if you ever feel like the people you sacrificed for have forgotten your value, remember Amina. Remember the woman who sold peace, comfort, sleep, land, and even food from her own mouth to push a man into the future, only for him to come back believing she belonged in his past. Remember that silence is not always dignity, patience is not always protection, and loyalty without boundaries can become permission for cruelty. But also remember this: the same hands that built someone else's rise can rebuild your own life when you finally stop begging for fairness and start demanding it. And maybe that is the deepest lesson of all. Sometimes the heartbreak is not that they changed. Sometimes the heartbreak is realizing they were always capable of becoming exactly who they became. The victory begins the day you stop asking why they betrayed you and start asking what truth, what strength, and what future still belongs to you. If this story moved you, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and the one moment that shocked you the most. And if you want more powerful African drama stories filled with betrayal, revenge, truth, and emotional courtroom justice, make sure you subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and stay here for the next one.